In 1931, a historian named James Truslow Adams coined a phrase, 3 words. And those 3 words became the most successful psychological operation ever run on a free people. It wasn't run by a government. It wasn't run by a military. It was run by the culture itself. And you have been living inside it your entire life. Here's a question nobody asks you. Why do you feel like a failure? Not in a dramatic crying on the floor way. I mean that quiet, persistent hum underneath everything. The feeling that you're behind, that everyone else figured something out that you didn't, that you're working hard, maybe harder than your parents ever did, and yet something feels off. You scroll LinkedIn and see someone your age just raised a Series A. You watch a Netflix show and the protagonist has a loft apartment in Manhattan on a journalist's salary. You see the highlight reel of Silicon Valley success stories and somewhere in your chest a knot tightens. That feeling, it has a name. And it's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's not a character flaw. It's a manufactured response. You were engineered to feel exactly this way, and today I'm going to prove it to you. Let's go back, not to 1931. Further, 1848, Gold Rush, California. Picture this, you are a farmer in Ohio. Your hands are cracked, your soil is dry, you have watched 3 of your crops fail. You owe money to a bank that doesn't care whether your children eat. And then, a letter arrives. A newspaper headline, a rumor spreading through every tavern and church from Maine to Missouri. Gold in California, mountains of it, just lying there. Now here's what actually happened to the men who went. Over 300,000 people made the journey to California between 1848 and 1855. They left behind families, farms, stability. They crossed deserts. They buried friends on the road. They arrived, sunburned, sick, half-starved, and the vast majority of them found nothing. Or more precisely, they found just enough to keep going. That's the crucial detail history doesn't emphasize. They didn't fail completely. They found traces, small flakes of gold, enough to feel like the motherlode was right around the next bend. Enough to convince themselves that quitting now, after everything they'd sacrificed, would be the real mistake. The people who got rich? It wasn't the miners. It was Levi Strauss who sold them pants, Samuel Brannan who sold them shovels, the railroad companies who charged them to get there. The system got rich. The dreamers got a story to tell, if they survived. Now hold that image. Hold it, because we're going to need it. In 1971, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner was already famous. Controversial. The man had spent decades studying behavior, specifically what makes living creatures repeat actions, even irrational ones. His discovery was elegant and terrifying. It's called variable ratio reinforcement. Here's how it works. You put a rat in a box. There's a lever. Every time the rat pulls the lever, a food pellet drops. The rat pulls. Pellet drops. Pull. Pellet. The rat learns quickly, eats, and then mostly stops. It's satisfied, it knows the system. It doesn't obsess. But now, change one variable. Make the reward random. Sometimes the rat pulls the lever and gets a pellet. Sometimes it pulls 3 times and gets nothing. Sometimes 10 times. Sometimes the pellet comes on the second pull. The rat has no idea when the reward is coming. What does the rat do? It pulls the lever, compulsively, frantically. It cannot stop, even when it's no longer hungry. Even when its paws are raw, it keeps pulling. Skinner called this the most powerful form of behavioral conditioning ever discovered. Now ask yourself, when was the last time someone told you clearly and honestly exactly what actions would guarantee you success in America? They didn't. They gave you stories. Steve Jobs dropped out of college and changed the world. But they didn't tell you about the 10 million people who dropped out and work retail. Elon Musk works 100-hour weeks. But they didn't tell you he had a $180 million inheritance from his father's emerald mine. Mark Zuckerberg built Facebook in a dorm room. But they didn't tell you about the infrastructure, the Ivy League network, the early venture capital that ordinary people never see. You got the highlight. Never the whole film. Variable ratio reinforcement. You are the rat. The American dream is the lever. And the pellet, real lasting security and belonging, almost never comes. Let me show you what this does to your brain. Because this isn't just philosophy, this is neuroscience. When you anticipate a reward, when you believe success is just around the corner, your brain releases dopamine. Not when you get the reward, when you chase it. This is the part most people get completely wrong. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It's the pursuit chemical. It evolved to keep you hunting, searching, striving. It doesn't care if you're happy. It cares that you keep moving toward the target. A 2001 study by neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz at Cambridge demonstrated this precisely. Dopamine neurons fire in anticipation of reward, and they fire harder when the reward is unpredictable. Uncertainty doesn't discourage the brain. Uncertainty amplifies the drive. Now layer onto this something called social comparison theory. Developed by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954, it's simple. Humans measure their own value not by an objective standard, but by comparing themselves to those around them. For 99% of human history, your comparison group was your village. Maybe 150 people. You knew them. They knew you. The gap between the most and least successful person in your tribe was visible, comprehensible, and largely surmountable. Then came mass media. Then came Hollywood. Then came the internet. Suddenly your comparison group isn't 150 people. It's 330 million Americans. And then 8 billion humans. And the algorithm, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, is specifically designed to surface the most extreme outliers, the youngest billionaires, the most dramatic transformations, the rarest success stories. Your brain, running on ancient hardware, processes these outliers as your peer group and measures you against them every single day. This is not an accident. Manufactured inadequacy is a trillion-dollar industry. When you feel behind, you buy things, courses, supplements, productivity apps, motivational content. Yes, even this genre. When you feel deficient, you consume. And the economy that was built on the American dream depends on you, never quite arriving, because a satisfied consumer is a dormant consumer. The historian Christopher Lasch wrote about this in 1979 in The Culture of Narcissism. He argued that modern consumer capitalism requires a population that is perpetually self-dissatisfied. Content people don't buy. Anxious, striving, comparison-addled people spend. He was called a pessimist. He was correct. Here's where it gets darker, because the psychological architecture of the American dream wasn't accidental. It was constructed. After World War II, the United States faced an unusual problem. Industrial production had exploded to fuel the war effort. Factories that made bombs now needed to make something else. And the economist Victor Lebow wrote a memo in 1955 that should be in every school curriculum in this country. He wrote, "Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfactions and our ego satisfactions in consumption." Read that again. Spiritual satisfactions in consumption. He wasn't describing what people wanted. He was describing what needed to be manufactured. Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, founder of modern public relations, had already been doing this for decades. In the 1920s, he convinced American women to smoke cigarettes by linking cigarettes to suffrage. He called them torches of freedom. He hired women to light cigarettes while marching in a suffrage parade. Sales exploded. He later wrote a book. He called it, without irony, Propaganda. In it, he described the American public as a herd requiring invisible governance by those who understood the true motivations of human desire. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented, cited, archived historical facts. The machine was built deliberately, and its fuel was your insecurity. Now enter the post-war suburban boom. The GI Bill, genuinely beneficial for returning veterans, though deliberately excluding Black Americans, a wound that still bleeds. The rise of the highway system, Levittown, the two-car garage, the 30-year mortgage, and with it an entirely new metric for measuring human worth, net worth, not wisdom, not community standing, not craft or character, net worth. And the genius of it, the truly diabolical genius, is that they made you want to be measured this way. They made the cage look like a ladder. Let's talk about what this actually does to a human life. The United States has the largest economy in the history of civilization. It also has some of the highest rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and deaths of despair in the developed world. That's not a coincidence. A 2023 Gallup survey found that 57% of Americans report being stressed daily. The American Psychological Association has reported rising anxiety across nearly every demographic for over a decade. We are the richest, most comfortable, most medicated population in human history, and we are miserable. Why? Because the dream was never designed to be completed. It was designed to be pursued. Think about what the Navy SEALs understand that most people don't. SEAL training, SAR, is not primarily a test of physical fitness. The instructors will tell you this openly. The men who quit are often physically superior to the men who pass. What BUDS tests is your relationship with suffering. Specifically, can you tolerate the gap between where you are and where you want to be without that gap destroying you? Most people can't, not because they're weak, but because nobody taught them that the gap is permanent. That in a healthy life there is always distance between where you stand and where you're reaching. The goal is not to close the gap forever. The goal is to learn to walk in the gap, purposefully, without panic, without the desperate flailing of someone convinced they're failing. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a man who commanded an empire, who faced plagues and wars and betrayal, wrote in his private journal, never intended for publication, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He was describing something the modern American dream directly contradicts. The dream says your happiness is out there, waiting for you to earn it. Aurelius says, your peace is in here, available right now, if you stop outsourcing your well-being to circumstances. One of these philosophies produces resilient human beings. The other produces a lucrative consumer base. So what do? I'm not going to give you a morning routine. I'm not going to tell you to journal and drink water. You've heard that. It doesn't address the root. Here are 3 fundamental reorientations, not hacks. Reorientations. Step 1. Audit your comparison architecture. Your brain is comparing you to people constantly. You cannot stop this, it's evolutionary. But you can choose who you compare yourself to. Here's a practical exercise. For 7 days, track every moment you feel a pang of inadequacy. That subtle contraction in your chest when you see someone else's success. Write down the trigger, the person, the platform. Then ask, do I actually know this person's full story? Their failures, their advantages, their private suffering? You won't. You never do. You're comparing your entire internal experience, the doubt, the fear, the bad days, to someone else's curated external projection. The psychologist Brené Brown at the University of Houston has spent 2 decades documenting what she calls the vulnerability gap, the space between who we present to the world and who we actually are. Her research found that the people with the highest levels of well-being and connection were those who were most willing to close that gap for themselves, not for performance. Stop comparing your insides to other people's outsides and aggressively curate what you consume. Every piece of content you absorb is setting the baseline for your comparison group. The algorithm is not your friend. It is an engagement optimization machine that profits from your anxiety. You have to override it manually, deliberately, and repeatedly. Step 2. Redefine the metric. The American dream gave you one metric: accumulation. More money, bigger house, higher status, better title. This metric has a fatal flaw. It has no ceiling. No matter how much you accumulate, there is always more to accumulate. The hedonic treadmill, documented exhaustively in positive psychology research since the 1970s, shows that humans adapt rapidly to improved circumstances. Lottery winners return to their baseline happiness within a year. So do people who become paralyzed. The adaptation is almost universal. The treadmill never stops. So what's the alternative metric? Contribution and mastery over time. Not what you have, what you build, what you get better at, what your presence adds to the lives of specific, real, named human beings. This is not soft. This is ancient. The Stoics didn't ask how much do I have. They asked how well am I fulfilling my function? A soldier asked himself, am I a better soldier? A father asked, am I raising children who will add something to the world? A philosopher asked, am I thinking more clearly than I was last year? These are measurable. These are within your control. These create a sense of progress that no algorithm can undermine and no comparison can nullify. Pick a craft. Go deep. Track your own improvement over months and years. This is what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called flow, the state of complete absorption in a challenge just at the edge of your ability. His research found that flow is one of the most reliable predictors of reported happiness and meaning. It is also completely free, and almost no one is selling it to you, which should tell you something. Step 3. Rebuild real accountability structures. The isolation of the American dream is a feature, not a bug. Isolated people are easier to sell to. Isolated people have no external reality check on their anxiety. Isolated people consume more. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford has documented what's become known as Dunbar's number, the cognitive limit of around 150 meaningful relationships a human brain can maintain. More specifically, he found that humans function best with about 5 intimate relationships, 15 close friends, and 50 regular acquaintances. Most modern Americans have fewer than 3 close friends. The number of Americans who report having no close friends has roughly tripled since 1990. We are the most connected and most lonely civilization in history. You need real people, not followers, not a network. People who will tell you when you're deluding yourself. People whose lives are made concretely better by your presence. People you would help move furniture for, and who would help you move furniture. This is not a metaphor. The Surgeon General of the United States designated loneliness a public health epidemic in 2023. The health effects of social isolation are comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Build or join a small, real community, a group with a shared discipline, a running club, a study group, a small business accountability cohort, not a group where everyone performs success at each other, a group where failure is allowed, honesty is expected, and showing up matters. This is harder than any productivity hack. It is also the thing most likely to save your life. Let me leave you with one final image. In 1969, a man named Walter Mischel ran an experiment at Stanford that became famous. The marshmallow test. A child is left alone in a room with 1 marshmallow. They're told if you wait 15 minutes, you'll get 2 marshmallows. The ones who waited, the research initially suggested, grew up to be more successful. The story was everywhere. Another American parable, delay gratification, win the game. But here's what the follow-up research found quietly decades later. The ability to wait for the second marshmallow wasn't really about willpower. It was about trust. Children who had grown up in stable, reliable environments, where adults kept their promises, waited. They believed the second marshmallow would actually arrive. Children from chaotic, unpredictable environments, where promises were made and broken, where the future was uncertain, ate the marshmallow immediately, not because they lacked discipline, because their experience had taught them that waiting was a fool's game. What does that tell you? The system we're in, the relentless variable ratio comparison machine of modern American consumer culture, is structurally designed to feel unreliable, to feel like the second marshmallow might never come, to keep you anxious, grasping, and spending. The response to that is not to try harder. The response is to build the kind of internal stability, the kind of genuine community, the kind of values-based life where you no longer need the second marshmallow to feel whole. Not because you've given up, because you've seen through the experiment. The dream was always a story someone else told you, about a destination someone else defined, measured by metrics someone else invented, to serve an economy you didn't design. You are allowed to write a different story, not louder, not more ambitious, yours. If this video made something click for you, not just entertained you but actually shifted something, that's worth more than a like. Share it with one person who needed to hear it. And if you want to go